Welcome to the DIY Writer Show with the mild-mannered, slightly heroic host, Jeff Bacon.
This is Jeff Bacon with the DIY Writer Podcast, and today we have Margaret O'Connor. I'm sorry, Margaret O'Connor. I can say that. The book that we're going to be discussing is very interesting to me. It's Scandal in the Shadows, and it's the original priest, Mother Mary. So any of you who are kind of curious what this is going to be, it's going to be all about the Catholic Church and guess what? Some scandals and some things that they may have possibly forgotten to mention about the history of the church for whatever reason. But with me is Margaret. Margaret, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Thank you.
Cool. So let's just jump right into your book. Where do you want to start?
Well, the cover of the book has a beautiful picture, an 11th century picture of Mary, Mother of God. And this is going to be a shock for most of your listeners. Mary, Mother of God, was actually known as a woman priest, and they called her Mary Priest, and her title was the model for all priesthood in the Catholic Church. And if anyone is familiar, is either a Catholic or a Christian, they know that they've never seen any woman up on the altar as obviously woman priest. So what am I talking about? I just want to let you know that this isn't some theory of mine. This is actually comes from biblical information. There has been Catholic priests, sisters, even ministers of other denominations that have done the hard biblical research. And it is proven that Mary was a priest. And you're probably thinking now, wait a minute, how can Mary be a priest? She wasn't ordained a priest. Back when Jesus was conceived, the church used the term the Immaculate Conception. And in order for the church to use that term, they actually had to prove that Mary was a priest. So what they did was they went back into our church tradition and they used Hebrews 26. Isn't it fitting that we have such a high priest? So after Jesus, Mary is a priest, and she was anointed with the same blessing of the Holy Spirit that Jesus received. And when you think of it, Jesus himself was never ordained, but it was through the Holy Spirit. So she is as much a priest. And I know it is, you scratch your head because you've never heard this. And
no, I scratched my head at the term ordained because that's a it's a Catholic term that is in the present, at the time that you're talking about, we're talking about Jesus, who was born. He was born to save the Jews. It was Jewish, and the actual Christian faith didn't develop until after basically the Jews rejected him, and basically he ripped apart all the religions and everything else. So when I hear the term ordained, I mean, it kind of makes me like, okay, well, it's Jesus. It's God, it's his religion. He can kind of do what he wants. So, when I hear somebody say, well, he was never ordained, ordaining is just some Catholic thing that they do right now for priests. I mean, it's not something.
And that's a part of it. So many people will use that in a sense of an argument. I mean, present day Catholics.
Sure.
That don't want to hear the truth. They will come out with that Jesus, wasn't, or Mary was never a priest. She was never ordained. So I just want them to know, and anyone else, that Mary is as much a priest back then and today. What a striking role model she would be.
Well, my other question to be is, how many of the disciples were ordained?
Yeah,
by
it
the
was
Catholic Church,
basically,
which didn't exist at that
oh,
time.
no. And you know what's very interesting about that point? We've all heard the one story. Jesus obviously sent out the 12 apostles, the 12 men. And when we think of apostles, pretty much that's it, with the big exception of Mary Magdalene. But aside from Mary Magdalene, there was actually a term. It was called the concept of apostleship. So anyone could be an apostle back in the early centuries if they were sent out by their own community. And then that really gives credence to the idea when you hear that aside from Mary Magdalene, there were all these other women apostles.
Mm-hmm. No,
But again, conveniently, the church, these stories are there, but they've never seen the light of day.
Which, I mean, it doesn't surprise me because I think the Catholic Church picks and chooses what they want to teach. I honestly believe that. I am a born a Protestant, and I converted to being a Catholic, and I'm a Catholic without the guilt, so I don't have a problem talking about this stuff. I really don't, and I wrestle up Catholics and rile them up every time I get a chance in church or whatever. I'm not even sure the priests talk to me anymore, to be honest with you. Well, maybe they do. I don't know, but
that's selective memory. That's what I call when the church doesn't remember. They, in particular to the woman priest issue, they have a very selective memory.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, that's not shocking to me. So why do you think that they ignore that? I mean, what's your theory behind this? Is it just because they want to be, kind of chauvinistic, or it's just it's a men's club? What is it?
Well, it is a men's club, and it really stems back to the earliest centuries of the church, where this John Wingegard had a book, The Ordination of Women in the Catholic Church. And he found out that Roman law, obviously back then, Rome was the big player. They had everything. They had the big armies, they had the land. Obviously, they had their own law. And if you were a woman back then, except for those that really inherited money or, had some property, they were considered nothing. So they obviously weren't treated that well in the Roman civil law. Well, then you get these Latin-speaking theologians over in Italy, and they decide basically, as John Wingegard said, to shape Roman law into Catholic Church law. So if you're a woman on the totem pole, you're already down 3 or 4 pegs. And it was the language that they used about women, not only derogatory, but really, I mean, it was sexist. It was as low as you could get. So if they're coming from that purview of viewing women as nothing, then when we bring that into the context of the Catholic Church, these laws that they had were just unreal. If you were a woman and you had a child, if you had a baby boy, you had to wait 40 days. It was called churching before you could get back into the church because you were impure due to the birthing process. These men were just disgusted at blood. That made women so unclean. But here's the kicker. If you had a baby girl, it wasn't 40 days. You had to wait 80 days because the sin of Eve. I'm just giving you these illustrations. There was also a saying like, in sorrow, you are born.
The Catholic Church, in my opinion, is really good at laying down guilt trips and shunning whatever they don't like. And what you just said, yeah, that sounds like something I'd expect to read in you know, some literature from a Catholic church. I mean, it really does. The sorrow of being born. Oh, my poor soul. Oh my God, I need to, you know, beg for forgiveness for things that I did, what I'm going to do, and you know, everything else. And I understand that, but it's always this, you know, beating on your heart, and I am so sorry. And by the way, give me money. You know.
Yes, definitely. But I'm using that illustration like in the context of like you wanted to know why is it like men they seem to have all the power and they're so against women? Well, you figure if it started back then, you had the early church fathers, then obviously it went into the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, and the church even had 5 biblical reasons, okay, why women could definitely not become priests.
What are those reasons?
Well, the first one is they believed that women weren't made in the image of God. And the men at that time, they had dominion over women, and they saw a woman as absolutely nothing. So in their minds, they're thinking, wait a minute, how can you say that a woman is made in the image of God if we have dominion over that woman and she is nothing? But yet they're conveniently, the church fathers forgot Jesus's own biblical words in Galatians that there is no man or woman, all are one in Christ Jesus. Or even if you go back into Genesis 1:27, in the dominion, in the divine image, God made them female and male. That was conveniently forgotten. Then the second reason was that women supposedly were told by Paul that they could never teach. And again, this is it's proven, these are all proven to be cultural prejudice. They saw women back then as being feebly minded and emotionally upset. And there was even a common law. And this particular condition, of course, was more prevalent in women than men. So in their minds, how can a woman be out in public? I mean, teaching? Then there was the idea that all women carried the sin of Eve. And you go back into Genesis, and again, this was simply cultural prejudice. And then the idea that Jesus chose only the 12 men to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. So right away, that was taken in the context that, wait a minute, he's got 12 men there. So that means from that point and into the future that he never wanted to have a woman as priest. But the biblical research shows that if you look into ancient Israel, at that time, that culture was purely patristic. And Jesus knew having 12 women, that was no way was that going to fly. And then the last reason is because Jesus was a man, we need to have a man as well up on the altar during the consecration. But what I'm trying to say is these 5 reasons explicitly are said to be have biblical reasons behind them. And they've all been proven that no, it's all cultural prejudice. So I guess my question is, okay, in 2020, why can't the hierarchy of the church come out with some pronouncement and let's get this corrected? But of course, that isn't even in their radar, because it's sad to say our own Pope, now this was really unreal. Back in 2010, he was a cardinal, and he had a book, it was called, let's see, On Heaven and Earth. And in there, in so many words, he said that women received their rights, you know, whatever they wanted, all their issues, back when women received the right to vote. All right, well, that's 1920. And do you mean from 1920 to present day that we women have no issues? But seriously, take that idea back into the Catholic Church. It's not on their radar, and it's been proven again by Jesus's own biblical words that we are equal. So our baptism sadly means nothing, because you know, after baptism, one is confirmed by the Holy Spirit. But then if you're a woman, it's like there's an imaginary line going across. You can't, if you receive a call to be a woman priest, well, forget it, because it's not going to go anywhere. But beyond just the context of the way that women were treated and what I just said, the reason why women aren't priests today stems back to not only past hierarchy, the present hierarchy. And this is what I call a cover-up. What do I mean? This is deliberate. This is calculating. The Pope has his own commission. And back in 1976, that commission found that there's absolutely no biblical reason why a woman can't be ordained. So what did that commission do? What did the hierarchy do? They have just sat on that since 1976. Go back to 1974. There was another, was called something like an International Theological Commission. And lo and behold, they studied the topic of women deacons. Pope Francis wouldn't have even had to convene just back here in 2016. They had a commission looking into that issue. Were there women deacons? This was already resolved back in 1974. And they went way back into the biblical research. And believe it or not, there's 3 Roman texts, and they were all in agreement that yes, there were women deaconesses. And what they meant by that was you would have a woman or a man on the altar in the presence of a bishop. The bishop would lie his hands over them. They would have like a stole put around their neck. They would both receive the chalice. Yes, there were women deacons. So we know that there's no reason why women can't be priests. There were women deacons. Yes, and above all, Mary, Mother of God, was a woman priest. So this is just, it's all very deliberate. It's all very calculating. And I am really want to start a worldwide conversation, not only right here in the US, but I want to reach Catholics, you know, whether it's in Europe, anywhere, like, you know, Ireland, I'm Irish, so reach my fellow Irishmen, Australia. There are so many Catholics today that obviously don't even know that this information is out there. And they don't even know that the woman priest issue is a genuine issue, because obviously, if your church never told you about this, then you have someone like me out there picketing. Obviously, I must really look like a heretic or a radical to them, because they're gonna, you know, obviously so many go by the status quo, like, look it, be quiet. Don't act more stupid than you are. Go over to that church 3 blocks away. Some people do, which is nice at the end. They'll question me and I'll, you know, give them different books. But it's just, the Catholic Church today, the hierarchy is in the driver's seat. They've come down centuries ago that no, this isn't even an issue. There never were women priests. So obviously they're not going to be hounded by the press. They're not hounded with questions. And then you get a few people that have come out, and even there's like before, there's all these books on this research that's there, and it just never goes anywhere. And maybe it's because of my Irish background. I just don't like to be lied to. And I basically was fed up, because when it comes down to, I've been duped and any other Catholic woman. And I mean, you know, dupe might not be the right word, but it is very cutting, because that's exactly how it feels. You know, when you realize about people, your church, now I know there's a big difference between, I grew up in the 50s. You know, back then you just pray and obey. You didn't question anything. But I want to let my fellow Catholics know that Vatican II came out, and the section under the laity says that the laity have every right to speak out on issues of importance. So you're not breaking any law, and our hierarchy needs to be held accountable, because until they're held to be accountable for what they haven't done, which they should have been doing, you know, bringing this information out and allowing women to be priests like they were originally, sadly, nothing's going to change.
So the formation of the Catholic Church happened, you know, basically started with Constantine. And, you know, they wrote their doctrine for the Holy Roman Church, and they created the religion based on what was going on in Rome at the time. And so they took that doctrine and also that Roman law and kind of combined it into what we now know as the Catholic faith. And now you're saying that there's plenty of proof that women were deeply involved in the church before that, and the exclusions only happened when they actually formed the faith based around what Constantine did. Is that, I mean, that, and it just kind of grew from there. Is that what you're basically heading towards? In that even though the historical documents that are either biblical or extra biblical prove that, you know, women were involved in the religion on a priest level.
Yes, and that's the problem, that the Catholic Church hierarchy will not acknowledge their own church's early past history. And that's obviously where this information was found. And I will say, of course, to the writers of the theology, obviously, if something has disappeared, well, they're not going to keep bringing it up. But back in 2000, there were 3 separate studies on women's ordination. And I can't believe that the Catholic Church said they don't know anything about this, because I'm sure their radar would have been up. And even though they're not saying anything, they would have been interested to see, you know, what was found. So they are so afraid, basically, I really feel that, of having women come in. And one of the big things that you'll notice, if there's any discussion on like women being ordained or women priest, they'll bring the word power in, like women are doing something wrong. And basically, I would tell Pope Francis, this has nothing to do with power. This has to do with a woman's own spirituality. They've received that same call like a man gets that he wants to be a priest. And that's what they want to answer that call. And yet right away, there's the conjecture that what's behind that is they want power. You know, anything sinister to.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, it's a political organization. What I'm really trying to grasp is, you know, you say it's power or whatever. I mean, what would be detrimental to the church to let women be priests? I mean, you know, would it be that you know, the priests wouldn't be able to play with kids like they have in the past? Or I really don't understand where that power comes from.
First of all, I think they would it would be a total embarrassment because they would have to admit that they have been lying, that they have been covering up for centuries. The fact that there were women in the church, because from the time I was little in the 50s, there are no women priests. There never were any women priests. And they will finally, they recognized Mary Magdalene, and that was turned around. Because originally she was seen as a whore, and this one pope took it whatever way. But I mean, seriously, they still are coming out in 2020. There never were any woman priests.
So in the beginning, and this is something I don't know, but when they actually formed the Catholic religion and going forward, was Mary, did she hold the same place in the church as she does now, or did that develop over time?
Well, of course, we just didn't know until we heard, now it's in the biblical records, yes, that she was actually a priest back then that we didn't know about. But what happened?
Well, I'm not saying that she was a priest. What I'm asking is, how the Catholic religion holds Mary up as almost a deity, the mother of God, and Hail Mary and all this other kind of stuff, and you can pray to her and you can do all this other stuff. So she's more like a high-ranking saint, I guess, within the religion. Has she always had that stature, or is that something that developed over time?
That developed over time. She obviously would have been a beloved character to the first Christians. Obviously, they were right there on the scene. They knew her personally, and then from the time after her death, that grew. And there's nothing wrong, like having Mary up there. I say having her up on that pedestal, but sadly, for so many Catholic women Christians, they see her only in that one context. They can't see her having this totally other role where you can relate to her as an everyday woman. I mean, when you figure Mary back at her time, she wasn't a rich lady. She was poor. She had to go out and lug that water. Mm-hmm. She had to relate, to her fellow neighbors, and, they all had a hard lot at it. It wasn't anything easy, but over the centuries, the artists were depicting Mary. Obviously, she looks different than she really is. If she's really a Semitic woman, her features she wouldn't have blonde hair. She wouldn't have blue eyes. She wouldn't be dressed like she was in a palace. I mean, this sister, I can't think of her.
Well, even the portraits of Jesus, they look so Englishy, or Germanic, or depending on what depiction it is. It's like, he was he was Middle Eastern.
But there's really, if you see someone up on a pedestal, at least this is how I relate, you can have problems like, well, my God, I never can attain to be that. I'm just an average Jill. Mm-hmm. I mean, seriously. And I think this just opens up a whole new context. And one I think that any woman can relate to, especially to the younger generation, that you are really the hope of the church. Because we've got to get our brooms and literally we've got to clean out these lies and cover up. And as well, I picket for the priest sexual abuse issue. So I'm like, I got two different hats on, but I love my church, and I don't want people to think of, oh my God, she's a heretic. All she's doing is raving. This is wrong. That is wrong. But maybe I just look at it from the context of, is this really the behavior of Jesus? I mean, come on. Let's just try to mirror or look at maybe how Jesus would approach a topic. And whether it's the awful sexual abuse or if it's the woman's ordination issue, I think then we can start to get some type of a clearer view But I mean, our church has just gone so astray. And you said money. Oh, they'll do anything to hold on to their money.
They absolutely will. Let's say about 5 years ago, I within the last 5-6 years, I have been utterly disgusted at the Catholic Church. It's something that over the years I've really struggled with. And I've listened to the priests get up in front and, after there's another sexual, whatever, the child abuse or, whatever's going on. And they go up and they explain that, well, this is the devil and this is that and this is that. No, you've got a bunch of priests that went out and are pedophiles. And then you hid it. And then when it finally came out, then you paid reparations for it and then swept that priest to another place so that, you could kind of hide it instead of actually dealing with the problem, instead of letting them being prosecuted the way they should have and everything else. And then it became a witch hunt. And, there's a lot of people that feel the same way that I do, that the Catholic Church has done so much covering up and so much, it's became so political that it's really morphed into something that's not even close to what they preach.
And looking at the chessboard behind you, that's just how those bishops and cardinals, it was almost like they were on a chessboard and they were moving those priests. Like if they were in Buffalo, they moved them out to Orchard Park or the suburbs, West Seneca, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you figure that's just the Buffalo diocese, but you go through every single diocese in every single city in the US, and then that's not, we have to get into Europe. This is awful because you have so many bishop enablers, cardinal enablers, and this sexual abuse issue is not going to end until obviously not only the priest, but the enabler bishops and cardinals as well go to jail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can't take somebody like that and forgive them and then put them in charge of a preschool or a youth group or something like that, because they're going to reoffend. But what I have seen is if there is a priest that actually embezzles money from a church, man, mm-hmm. they have no problem taking them out. That is horrible. But if you abuse kids, it's okay. We'll just move you. And that makes me sick to my stomach.
Well, you know how these bishops got really sickeningly creative. They were able to make the distinction of labeling what they did as sin. Because if they could label this priest molester as a sinner, then they wouldn't have to send him to the police. He wouldn't be arrested. He wouldn't be handcuffed. Obviously, he wouldn't have a trial. He wouldn't have to go to jail. But how these men could label rape as sin, I'll never understand that.
I wish I could. I have a very strict view on what should happen, and there's a lot of people that I was in a men's group that met in the morning that when you try and discuss these things, what's bothering you about the church? Okay, there's a whole bunch of pedophiles abusing children within the church. What are we going to do about it? This is a men's group that is trying to change the world and change the religion and be this, and they would just shut down. And it's like, okay, what kind of men are you if you can't actually discuss this stuff? It's taboo or whatever. And it made me just, again, I got out of the group because you know what? They aren't going to do anything except for pat themselves on the back and tell them how great they are. And I see the same thing that's happening with what you're discussing here in women actually being involved in the church. Every other Protestant religion, I'm pretty sure, I guess I don't know for a fact, but I know a lot of Protestant religions have adopted having women as pastors. And I've had, when I was growing up, I've had women that were, heads of the church and pastors, and they did an excellent job. There wasn't any kind of there wasn't a problem. You know, I don't know if they, you know, I don't know. I mean, the one I remember is Grace Huck. She was like, you know, she was an older lady and she was a pastor of our church for quite some time. And she, you know, took the church and actually led it in a good direction. You know, the Catholics saying that this is a power grab by women, it must be just the men's club that's afraid that, you know, hey, you know, it's going to be our dirty laundry. You know, they might get a hold of money. They might do this, that, do the other thing. I mean, I just don't understand why they would, you know, I guess I do. It's human nature. They want control. That's what they want. And they're afraid that women would come in and bust up their little men's club.
Well, they're really killing themselves, because no one's basically, there are priests going in, but not to the numbers, you know, that there used to be. And it really, if women were in there right now, it would not only help a tiny bit shore up the numbers, but they would have to, in a sense, change in some ways what they're doing. Hopefully. I mean, it just can't get any worse than it is. And there again, like you said, where were, you know, the other men not questioning when we would like picket for the pre-sexual abuse? If we had 4 or 5 people, that was a mob picketing. I mean, it was so sickening. Where were all these parents? I mean, obviously not the parents of offending children, but the other parents out there speaking up. And there were so many Catholics that came out. How dare you offend the hierarchy? Or how dare, you used the word bishop on your sign? And this one lady came out, and it was the middle of winter, and she whips her coat open. Oh my God, she had holy water. And she started to bless us. And I said, no, ma'am. I said, I know exactly what's going on in that church. And I said, she says, how dare you? And I said, well, how dare you come out and think it's fine and dandy that children are being raped and we're doing something wrong? And then she stopped. But they are just so incensed. And I do have a petition on my website, because I want any Christians, Catholics, any people of any denominations, look at the points on that. I want this sent to the hierarchy, and I want to get thousands of signatures, because the only way, as I said earlier, anything is going to change is we have to have a mass movement of everyday Catholics to wake up. And now, you know, with this information getting out there, to realize you have all been lied to. And there's nothing wrong, if you feel that's offensive, that something is wrong, of questioning your hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And particularly the younger generation, obviously, that has nothing really, you know, they're seeing anything good. This is your chance to really get involved and to shake things up, because we need fellow Catholics, Christians to really rattle and to shake, because nothing will happen.
What I honestly, and this is going to be harsh, and I apologize. Actually, I don't apologize for it. The Catholic Church has turned into probably the biggest child abuse cult that I've ever seen in my life, because that's what the priests and the bishops and the popes and the cardinal, or the pope and the cardinals and everybody else has come to accept and come to actually condone in their actions, in my mind. You know, it's not like they, you know, they come out and they say, oh yeah, that's really bad. And then they move them someplace else, and then they pay people off, and then they do this, and then they do that. It's a political organization that has slowly become a cult for pedophilia. I mean, that's the way I feel as being a part of that church. It's like, it's absolutely disgusting. And I think the only way that you change them is take the money away from them.
Oh, definitely. And that's where I don't understand the everyday Catholic. You have to put your foot down, make a stand in some way. And as you said, that is the best way. but yet there are Catholics that just won't do that.
No, they won't.
I don't understand.
But the only way you can the only way I can explain it in my mind is that, you've seen the documentaries on cults and how they kind of indoctrinate you, and they kind of, okay, you need to do this, you need to have your 10% tithing, you need to do this, you need to do that. And they've built that up as a political and a monetary, pyramid for themselves that ultimately goes up to the Pope. And I get that. And they've actually, in my mind, they've brainwashed these people into being that way. And in retrospect, they can do whatever they want. I honestly think that the leadership of the Catholic Church believes they're above the law. They're above not only the law of the land, but also the law of God. And they do things that are of their own desires. I think they have a very special way of taking things and twisting it and say, well, this is the will of God. Come here, Petey, sit on my lap. I mean, it just infuriates me.
Well, over a year ago, there was a big thing in the Catholic Church here in Buffalo, and finally we got the present bishop then. He's removed. The Pope, told him he had to get out. He was so creative that there was this priest that was let go by the former bishop. And as soon as this new bishop got in, all of a sudden this priest was reinstated. And I thought, this is unheard of. What's going on? Well, of course, that priest went back to his ways. So the bishop was moving him here and there. Well, finally, the bishop, I guess, got to his end of his straw, and he got really creative. He wrote a glowing letter to a Catholic cruise ship line that this priest, his morals were beyond. In other words, he figured, I'll get rid of him. But my God, you're putting him on a cruise ship. There could be children there too.
Wait a minute. The Catholic Church has a cruise line?
There's a Catholic cruise line. So I don't know if that the church owns it, but they call it a Catholic cruise ship line. That's what I heard. And anyway, they sent him there.
I am going to look that up because that just, okay, whatever. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one that I'd never heard of.
I don't doubt you. I'm sure you've done the research and seen it and everything, but it's one of those things being,
there was an email because it was on the news locally. They had the actual picture of the letter that he wrote to the cruise ship line.
Wow. I'm going to have to savor that one for a minute. In the
70s, they had a policeman came forward, and he said it was just known if you were a priest and you were arrested, they took you to the police station, but then as soon as the priest got there, he was never fingerprinted or pictures taken. There was a phone call made to the chancery, and then a priest would come and just pick him up. So it's almost like there was like some sort of a payoff or something going on that they just knew. If you were an offending priest, they take you away from the park to the police station, and then just you get out of there, never arrested, never. That was unreal. We just learned of that.
Wow. That isn't shocking. It's kind of jolting. Just the amount of, I guess for the last 20 years, the amount of just corruption that has been revealed about the Catholic Church. Again, it's just one more thing in a whole pile of just dirtiness that I can't explain it. I never imagined until I started, kind of looking at this stuff, what a pile of just decrepit lies and deceit and corruption just is involved in the church.
The scale of it, that's the thing that's just it's unreal, the scale of it.
Yeah, it's worldwide. It is absolutely worldwide. And, you know, it's sad that nobody, I mean, the general populace of the Catholics, just the common people, seem to really want to turn a blind eye to it. Like it's too horrible to actually look at. And I just, you know, oh, no, they're going to take care of it. So the people that are in charge that are hiding all this from you, when it actually comes out, they're going to be the ones that take care of it, not the common people. It's got to be the leadership. The Pope's going to take care of this. Absolutely. He's done such a stellar job so far. Good old Pope Francis.
And that's why you have to have laity on these commissions, because you just can't have the priest. I mean,
no, they're going to protect themselves.
Yeah.
They're absolutely going to protect themselves. They're going to circle the wagons and do exactly what they've been doing for the last probably 60 years, probably longer than that. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's horrible. And, you know, not to belabor because everybody's heard the news and everything else on you know, all the pedophilia that's involved within the Catholic Church. You know, your book, again, basically shaking the pillars of that church and saying, hey, wait a minute, there's a whole other realm here that you have completely ignored, you know, and you've basically taken part of the population and tried to make them insignificant in the church. And that is not the basis for, you know, what I believe the religion should have been. It wasn't about segmenting people out. It wasn't, you know, about creating, you know, a class system within the church of who could do what. I mean, and that's basically what they've done. And they've picked and have chosen things throughout history that they have claimed that this is for the betterment of the church. And this would be one more thing: not allowing women to do anything in the church except for cook for funerals and maybe be a nun.
And I think this is going to be shocking. You know, when I brought up Mary, that was shocking enough. When I read it, I was like, I had to put the book down. Wait a minute, did I just read this? But back in 1903, there was a Pope, Leo XIII, and he was able to hang a painting of Mary wearing priestly attire, a chasuble, and he was able to hang it up on his wall. Okay, that's 1903. 1913, things have changed. He no longer, you can't have a picture of Mary hanging up. Well, then let's jump to 1927. And again, in the whole context of 2,000 years of church history, this is really close for us. Well, in 1927, the hierarchy decided that they were going to take Mary's title away, and there would no longer be devotion to Mary priest. So this John Winsgards was saying, you know, okay, well, why would they do something like that? And he said, in so many words, isn't it ironic, in that same year, there were women from other church denominations that wanted to be woman priest. So they basically wanted to put the kibosh on this. Let's hide this. But I mean, it's really something to think. Why didn't, like, my grandmother never would have heard about this. This was so, even back then, I mean, at that time, there were people that Catholics, never knew this history.
Well, I mean, at the time, you had to rely on either newspapers or books, books in the library, whatever. And I'm sure that there is a selection process of what you actually get to read, versus now everything's kind of free for all. I mean, You've got the internet, you've got indie self-publishing, you've got, you know, I mean, worldwide bookstores like Amazon, where you can put anything out there that you want. And so, I mean, that information is more readily available to people, you know, versus, you know, in the early 1900s, or even the late 1900s. You know, I don't think there's ever been a time like now where the information has all information's been this available, you know. I do think that timing is kind of interesting. So 1927, I mean, that's, I'm trying to think, when did women's suffrage come around? That was 26.
1920.
Was it 20 or 26?
1920.
1920. Okay. So women are starting to be, recognized as, I mean, they're able to vote in the U.S. and everything else. And then by 1927, they take that out. I mean, that kind of makes sense, I guess. I mean, a way to maybe quash a women's movement within the church, maybe.
Definitely.
That correlates with that.
What is it? Out of sight, out of mind.
Something like that. Yeah. That's
convenient.
Yeah, it's convenient. There's no conspiracy theory here. It's all convenience, and it just happened that way. You bet. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I think that, like I said, I think if you did have female priests and they were not just 3 or 4. I mean, if you had a couple thousand throughout the United States, I think that would change the face of the religion, probably in the direction that the current aristocracy that runs the Catholic Church wouldn't necessarily buy into, I'm guessing.
No way.
I mean, that's trying to predict what would happen, and it's also kind of futuristic as far as, oh, this would change things forever. Who knows? Money does weird things to people. But I would have to guess that there would be a lot more clarity in what's going on within the church if that happened. Maybe that's...
Back in 2011, over in Rome, there was a former Catholic priest, Roy Bourgeois, and he had openly spoke up, for women's ordination, and he obviously was removed from his position as a priest, but he went over to Rome. And there's a women's ordination group, and they were like picketing over in Rome, and they had a big banner, women's ordination. And the group, they were actually arrested, and about 4 or 5 of them ended up in jail for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just shows you how Rome was cracking down with the police, having Catholics holding a banner. Women's ordination.
The Vatican City is its own little country within Rome.
Yes.
And they have their own army, and it is the richest place in the world as far as money goes.
Well, they didn't want anything to do with seeing that word women's ordination. It was like, they had to crack down. The police came in immediately. But I want to let the listeners know, if you're a Catholic and you're thinking, gee, well, I mean, how can I make a difference? Well, aside from signing the petition, there's groups called Call to Action, Future Church, Woman Catholic Roman Priest, Woman's Ordination. And when I said Woman Catholic Roman Priest, there actually are today Woman Catholic Roman Priests and bishops. Back in 2002 on the Danube River, a regular Catholic bishop, this had to be in secrecy because he knew he would, obviously be thrown out of the Catholic Church. He ordained Catholic women as priests and as bishops. And we've all heard this term apostolic succession. So what was so important was the women that were ordained as bishops, they're back here in the United States. So then they can continue that process of ordaining like new women as priests, as bishops. So we're sort of getting a foretaste of what it would be like to see Catholic women priests, Catholic women bishops.
Do you, I'm just kind of curious, the ordination process that the church goes through, and knowing what you know now, do you buy into it as far as how the church is acting and everything else? is it just pomp and circumstance, or is it actually, you know, a true calling from God? I
would hope that those, you know, the candidates do have a true calling, but now I know you're saying, like, in the context of seeing those certain priests that have that proclivity, we know when they've been sent away supposedly to a so-called treatment center, they've been known to definitely lie and say, look, I'm cured, just to obviously get back to their positions and have access to further victims. But I mean, I would hope that not all of those men were like that.
Well, and then it kind of brings me to, you know, you know, the best apples are straight off the tree. You know, you don't pick up one off the ground that's rotted and try and eat it, you know. And how does that actually happen? Are they indoctrinated and changed within the process of becoming a priest? You know, is it something that just happens over time? Do they have a predisposition to it that they could test for? Maybe. I mean, there's all sorts of things that yeah, it just kind of makes me wonder. I mean, you know, the Catholic Church prides itself on educating priests like no other religion in the world. And, you know, they pride themselves on being, you know, intellectuals in both science and religion. And you would think they'd come up with a vetting process to be able to stop, if they really wanted to be able to stop these types of things from happening, or be able to actually, you know, maybe even foretell. I mean, there's all sorts of psychological tests out there that you can do on people to find out whether or not they have a predisposition to something.
Sure. Yeah, that would be good. Our seminary in East Aurora, New York, outside of Buffalo, was closed. I mean, this place was so bad that you had the rector of that seminary would make a trip over to El Salvador, over to Poland, to get like seminarian recruits. And basically the story is he was like basically looking at them as eye candy. And when he got these individuals back to the seminary, they were basically told, well, like, you sleep with me, or if not, you're not going to have a green card anymore. I mean, it's stuff like that. That's brings a whole other avenue, if you will, you know, of these deviant priests doing, basically abusing their power, to say the least. But I mean, in such a sickening way. So, I mean, it's just coming from all avenues.
Yeah. That is, that's disgusting.
It is. You know, just when you thought you've heard everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's always something more that comes out from this church. There's always one more thing that just kind of pushes it, you know, one more step in depravity. And that's what I don't understand, is that there's so many good people that are involved, lay people that are involved in the church, why they aren't standing up and saying, you know what, enough of this crap. Enough. You know,
yeah, it's like I'm one woman out there. I was on another podcast show with Matt Napple, and he says, Margaret, are you David going against Goliath? And I said, yes, I'm little David going against the Catholic Church.
Here's the thing that drives me nuts, is that you can get 1,000 Catholics out there with one email to go picket and go against abortion because children's lives matter. But evidently that's only up until birth. And then after that, it doesn't really matter anymore if you let them play with priests. I mean, that hypocrisy drives me absolutely nuts. If a child's life matters so doggone much to you, then you should be protecting them when you bring them into the church, and make sure that this stuff isn't going to happen to them. You know, same thing with the young adults that are being brought into that seminary. Protect them from these predators. You know, and you can't sit there and say that I'm going to pick and choose what I can do, and I'm only going to do this and that, because guess what? That's not what your religion is based on. Your religion is based on loving everybody and making sure that everybody has a firm understanding of heaven and hell, and what's right and wrong, and how to live morally, and how to live in a certain way. And I think the church takes that and plays with it in a cult manner. And these men, and they are just men that have a predisposition to being a certain way. And I'm not even going to say gay, because that's, I mean, it's beyond that, because it's child pedophilia. It is playing with kids. It's sick and depraved and everything else. Oh God, it just makes me so angry that the good people of the Catholic Church can't actually stand up and do anything against and clean their own house, but they're more than willing to go over and put their morals on everybody else except for themselves. And that, like I said, that's one more thing that drives me nuts about the church.
But like you said, if they would only be vocal as they are in one aspect of protecting children, why, they just don't come out. They won't come out. And they see anyone that's questioning the hierarchy, like we're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when will it get through them? What did they think when the bishop our bishop in Buffalo was finally thrown out by Rome? Although our former bishop was saying, oh no, he wasn't let go by Rome. He just decided he was going to retire.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Convenient, the timing.
Very convenient. And again, the shell game that they play with the priests is disgusting. The amount of money that, they're always asking for money. And then, a lot of people donate to the Catholic Church, and then you see them paying out millions of dollars to these victims just to keep them quiet. And it's like, oh, okay, that's why this diocese is broke now and really needs the money, is because it's not because they're doing a whole lot of good with the money. They're not helping the homeless, and they're not, stopping this atrocity or that atrocity. They're covering their butts with money. And that's just it. Again, that makes me sick. Don't give them the money anymore. Let them hang out. Because if they don't have that money to pay off everybody in the world, guess what? They're going to be just like the rest of us and be like, you know what? There's some laws that you have to come over here and answer, that you broke, that now you're going to have to answer for because you didn't have the price to pay.
Well, you just wonder how many other places have they already put millions of dollars, in what accounts. And then they're saying they don't have money.
But that's their whole thing, is that they don't have money. And then they come out with these, gold crowns and pomp and circumstance. And they have these beautiful churches and that are, basically, like church remodels, are a big thing in finance. If you can get one of those, it's a $5, $6, $10 million church remodel, and it's good way for banks and financial institutions to make money. And then you see that same diocese, after they've remodeled 10, 12, 15 churches, taking money out of whatever coffers they have and paying $1 million here, $1 million there to people that have been abused by priests for years.
This is what I don't understand. Why didn't one single, not only, well, the priest, I guess they figured they know where they'd end up in Timbuktu, but the bishops, the cardinals, you mean to tell me, and that's how it's been like for centuries, not one of them couldn't have made a stand? Look, this happened, or send these priests, let the police know. And why, even to this day, like in 2002, you were thinking, oh, well, finally, after everything happened in Boston, we're finally going to start to clean things up. And that was all just like a fiasco, just a show. In fact, there was a commission over in Rome, and they actually allowed this one lady herself that had been molested as a child. And she was on that commission in Rome. And it ended up that she left it because she said, what was said privately when they had meetings, basically nothing was being done. And yet when these priests would get in front of the camera, you know, someone asking, well, how is the, oh yes, we're doing, and they weren't doing anything. She, you know, she was just fed up. So that was all like for show.
The one thought that I had at one point in time, and I have not researched it as much as I wanted to, because it made me upset, was I was listening to a bunch of tapes by Bishop Robert Barron, and it's on the origins of the Catholic Church. And he talks about, you know, the actual, you know, when Constantine created the church. Mm-hmm. And he makes this weird statement that says, you know, Constantine, under the guidance of God, took the Christian religion and melded it with some of the pagan rituals and some of the sun god religions and and to create this one true, beautiful religion that we have now. And it's like, wait a minute, what do you mean? And so, you know, he made it sound like, as he explained it, it was more of a political move of Constantine to keep Rome intact by making sure that there's something within the religion that appealed to everybody else of every other religion, mm-hmm. to make sure that they're all Catholic at one point in time. And, you know, when you start looking into Roman religions and what Romans did, you know, I mean, there's a reason that Rome fell. And it wasn't because they were beat militarily. I mean, it started much sooner than that. It was because of the depravity of the society and the corruption and everything else, and just kind of crumbled from within. You know, I mean, it was burning way before it set afire. Yeah. And the thing that really makes me wonder is that I wonder how much of those other religions actually did influence and continues to influence the way that priests and bishops and cardinals view the religion and view themselves as above the law. You know, it just kind of makes me, you know, really wonder if they don't have their own little, you know, they have the books that we read, and then they have their own little, you know, here's what we really do type thing in the background. It wouldn't surprise me, just because, you know, you've uncovered the lies of women's involvement in church. We've all heard about the pedophilia and the horrible sins that they've done against children and young adults. You know, there's all sorts of things out there that are pointing towards the Catholic Church had some involvement in getting the Nazis out of Germany in exchange for not bombing churches. You know, I mean, you can go back in history, and the Catholic Church has been involved in an awful lot of not very nice things throughout history. And you just kind of wonder if that isn't just that Roman influence right from the beginning.
Yeah, creeping in, definitely. Well, right from the very beginning, the way they shaped the Roman law, that started back then.
Yeah, that just, I mean, and that when you said that, and that Roman law was that women were worthless, and then it just kind of set the thought pattern for me again that, you know, okay, from the start, this one true religion has been all about power and money. But I don't know, you know, I'm a bit of a heretic, so I get that.
No, the money talks, definitely. And that money is front and central above all things, sadly.
Yeah.
But I would like the listeners to remember that the Catholic Church will say, beyond those reasons which we now know are prejudicial, they will say that women, we can't make women priests because we would have to start a new tradition. Well, wait a minute. That tradition was there of women Catholic priests, bishops, deacons, until the Catholic Church hierarchy decided that they wanted to remove women from the priesthood back in the early centuries. And they were really creative the way they did it. They started canon law, or in other words, man-made law.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that women were no longer allowed to be on the altar. So, I mean, obviously their priestly roles disappeared. And then if you go through like the centuries, you'll see like these different facts come out. And this one pope, he was so incensed that he wrote letters to his bishops, because he said women are up on the altar, they're there at the consecration, they're giving out communion, and they're doing stuff that's imputed only for the male sex. Well, there would be no reason to write these letters to begin with if women actually weren't, in that sort of a position. So it's funny when these people are complaining within the church history, other canon lawyers as well. In a sense, it's giving credence that yes, there were women priests or bishops or deacons back then.
It sounds to me like they're only abhor change when the change actually is to their detriment. But they're okay with changing stuff as long as it falls within whatever little plan they have.
Yes, and they are very creative with their canon laws.
Yeah, they are.
we have their number. But
I
seriously, any Catholic that's out there, maybe for the first time, this is obviously shocking to you. I love my church as you do, but I am fed up that this isn't the church that Jesus started. And you have the power, which is exciting. Get off your good intentions. And if you don't want to, get out there and picket or write letters, go over and just look at my petition. If you're fed up the way they took Mary's title away from her, in 2020, you're a woman and you're getting this spiritual call to become a priest, and it's going nowhere, well, then sign that petition.
And that would be at yourradicaltruth.com. You can see all the, she has, Margaret has the petition and also some other blogs, and her book is available there, and a few other things that, as far as affiliations and different things that we've been talking about. So if you go to yourradicaltruth.com, you can actually sign the petition and get some more information on what we've been talking about.
Thank you.
So typically these podcasts run about an hour or so or whatever, and we're kind of running a little bit past that. So just to kind of, I don't want to cut you short, but is there anything else they have on your mind that you want to talk about? I mean, I really have no rules here, so I mean, we can go past a time frame, whatever. But
no, I would just hope that the Catholics realize that they do have a beautiful church, and it's time that they just step back and just try to consider that there is a whole other side. There's actually factual truth about this issue, and that your involvement is needed more than ever to question your hierarchy.
So besides signing the petition, what else can they do? I mean, I assume, go to your bishop, talk to him, write letters to the cardinal, write letters to the Pope.
Or they can belong to those groups like Call to Action, Future Church, Roman Catholic Woman Priest. If you're still, maybe you don't believe in the woman priest issue, belong to SNAP. And this is a group for those Catholics that were sexually abused by priests, because this issue it's not over with, hardly.
I truly believe there's way more that's going to come out on this, and it's going to be, trickle out as it's discovered. And the problem is that there's so much interference in actually revealing what's going on underneath the slimy layers of the church that, you know, it's not going to be one big bombshell. It's going to be a bunch of little tiny explosions that, you know, when you see something in the news, you know, like Pennsylvania made me sick to my stomach, what they were doing there. In the stupid necklaces, and they were passing, you know, so a priest could recognize what the altar boy and how experienced they were based on the necklace they're wearing and all that kind of, I mean, it was just sick and depraved. And it is, you know, and not that I don't like, I'm not sure exactly how I want to say this, but the rationale and what was said in the church was a 5-minute blurb, and then it was just kind of passed over at the church that I go to. It was not something that was, you know, attacked and said, we need to rise up and do this or whatever, you know. And what really made me mad was on that, it was that sermon or the next one or whatever. There was a call to action to get more money. You know, one of those, you know, it's that time again to, you know, contribute to your diocese or whatever. And it wasn't that long after. And it's just like, wait a minute, stop. Let's deal with this horrible thing right here first. And then we can talk about, you know, giving you some more money. And it made me sick how that transition went from, you know, okay, this is horrible and this is the devil's work because, you know, we don't want to take responsibility for, you know, what we did as humans. You know, it's got to be shoveled off to somebody else. And then, oh, by the way, would you mind contributing, I don't know, $2,000-$3,000 a year to your local diocese so they can help, you know, pay the taxes to, you know, the church so they can pay reparations to these people that you know, actually were harmed by the church that's supposed to be protecting them, you know. And again, that was, you know, one of the last straws for me. It's like, oh, this isn't for me, you know.
Yeah, and there's no accountability. They just wanted to rush for forgiveness. You know, forgiveness for the clergy. And on a positive note, remember that Vatican II said, we are the people of God. And that might sound like pie in the sky words, really, with all this garbage that's going on within the church. But we have to gather together and we have to speak out. Vatican II said they wanted to eliminate all discrimination, all types of sexual discrimination. And we know where that went, nowhere. There's so many things that go nowhere. You have to make your hierarchy be accountable.
That's the same thing as a politician saying they want to lower your taxes. They do not. They want all your money now. You know, I think Will Rogers said it best that, you know, the government actually will put all your money in your pocket, throw it in your river, and you get to keep anything that's dry. You know, I mean, that's, yeah. At one point in time, I thought Vatican II was really cool, but you know, and my wife, who was Catholic, you know, I mean, that was the big epiphany. That was the, you know, change in the church and everything else. But my problem with Vatican II is that it's a lot of talk, but there's not a lot of walk with it. There isn't a lot of action. You know, I mean, some things changed, but there's a lot of things that didn't. So when you talk about, you know, equality and this and that, everybody like, yeah, everybody's equal except for you can't do this, can't do that. Yeah, I get it. You know.
Yeah, and it was too bad that Pope John the 23rd died because things weren't finished yet. And I always wonder if he was actually able to live for years after that, what else would have changed?
Yeah.
Because he died and then Pope Paul VI came in and he was just wasn't as open-minded.
It seems that the Catholic Church has a history of, you know, if there's one good pope that pops up and it seems like they're really making change, they're followed by 3 useless popes that don't really do anything. I mean, you know, that agenda dies and it kind of goes back to the same old, you know.
Oh yeah, and especially with Pope Ratzinger. That has put the church back so many years.
Well, I don't think Pope Francis has done a great job either. I really don't. I think he's got his own plans.
Yeah, he's, I know it's not, I would have hoped for more change, but he has his plate full in the sense that he's really getting it from the curia. And those are the people that have to be removed. Those are the people that, you know, want the status quo.
Well, if you ever look up Pope Francis and his history and what he did in South America, he isn't exactly an altar boy himself.
No.
You know, I was surprised to see him rise to that level. It was a political move, and I think that he's done some interesting things, but I also think he was probably the right person to be able to cover up and help take care of some of the crises that were going on in the church at the time that Ratzinger, I don't think, had even remotely the political skills to handle throughout the world. And I think that's why, you know, well, he's got to step down. We'll put this guy in who is a political animal. And, you know, I think Pope Francis does a really good job of, here, look, it's something shiny and we're going to do this and that, while he's taking care of all the other crap on the other, you know, behind the scenes. You know, there's been still within the Vatican, you know, even under Pope Francis, so many just dirty things that have come out, you know, within the Vatican itself. And I don't think that that's changed, but, you know, again,
No.
I don't know, you know, they do a good job of hiding it. But anyway, with that and all the doom and gloom and everything else, I think if anybody's listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, you know, Catholic bashing, this, that, and the other thing, I think the real message is that people, you belong to an organization that is having all sorts of problems. You have a leadership problem. You have you have a lawlessness problem, and you are the ones that can change it. And if you don't, honestly, I think you're just as bad. If you don't do something to change it, I think you're just as bad as the people that are in charge. That's right. My spiel.
Yeah. Well, it is, because what's happening will continue. You know, as I said before, they're in the driver's seat. Yep. And nothing is going to change until they are held accountable. And that holding them to be accountable is part of every day a member of the laity, what should be what should be your job. Mm-hmm. So you can do it, but let's get together and let's start doing that.
Yep, I agree. Well, with that, Margaret, it's been great talking to you. It really has.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
I think that you know, there's going to be some people that listen to this and they shut it off right away, and there's going to be some people that listen to it and say, you know what, this is happening. And there's going to be some people that listen to the whole thing and then just want to argue about it. I'm sure that's going to happen. And you know what, bring it on. You know, I have no bones about talking about this in a public forum or whatever, as you don't, because obviously you're standing around picket signs and everything else, and you wrote a book, which is available on Amazon.
Well, I appreciate it, because I just want to get this truth out. And there's so many podcast hosts I appreciate being on, because they hear the subject matter. No, we're passing because of the subject.
Yeah, when I was contacted about you, I'm like, yeah, let's go ahead. And I took a look at the book and I thought, should I or shouldn't I? And I just like, yeah, let's do it. What the heck? What the heck? You know what? My priest doesn't like me all that much anyway. We might as well just go ahead and take this right up the chain. But anyway, Margaret, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it very much. Again, your radicaltruth.com is the website that you go to for all the links and sign the petition. And the book, which is available on Amazon, is Scandal in the Shadows by Margaret M. O'Connor. If you would, and if you're interested, please pick the book up and take a look and see if it doesn't change your mind on things and maybe rile you up a little bit so you can make the changes that need to happen within the Catholic Church. With that, I'm going to say thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And this is Jeff with the DIY Writer Podcast telling you have a good day and keep your chin up. Bye-bye.
Please hit the subscribe button. I get a bonus for every subscriber and I only need 1,506 more to become a full-time paid employee. Help me please.